Thanks so much for being with us here on Atlanta News First Plus. I'm Joy Lim Nakrin, joined today by attorney Jamara Edward Shipp. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So we're really honored to have you here today because we have a very important case that we continue to follow. New developments in the case of the convicted killers of Ahmaud Arbery. So the men who have already been convicted in state court of murdering Ahmaud Arbery, they were convicted in state court of murder. They were in Atlanta today for a hearing because they're appealing the federal conviction on hate crimes charges. So this is the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. It is, although it's the same crime, it is a different conviction, a different court system. So I want to ask you, first of all, are you surprised at all by this latest development?
No. Most of your people who have been convicted in any court are going to exercise their right to an appeal. So this doesn't surprise me in the least. They're just going through whatever the process is for them to try and make sure that everything has been done correctly.
So in other words, this is pretty typical. When there's a conviction, there is usually an appeal. It's just a part of kind of the justice process, and that whoever's convicted, they're generally going to try to fight it.
Correct. You are granted the right to have an appeal in most criminal courts in the United States. So therefore, this is just typical. This is run-of-the-mill stuff. Maybe the arguments aren't necessarily typical, but yes, this is a typical procedure for most criminal cases.
Okay, so, one thing, again, I don't want people to be, obviously any kind of threat to justice is something to be alarmed about, but I don't want people to misinterpret and think that this means there's a possibility that these men are just going to walk the streets. Does it? Is there really that possibility, given the state conviction and the sentence, because all three men are sentenced to life in prison based on the state crimes? In the federal court system, the McMichaels, father and son, are both sentenced to life in prison, but William Roddy Bryan is sentenced to 35 years. So even if they were successful on appeal, that doesn't mean that they would just walk free, right?
That's correct. One thing that a lot of people need to keep in mind is that there are policies and procedures put in place to ensure that everybody gets justice correctly. Now, does it kind of inflame the passions of the general public that these people are exercising their right to an appeal? Of course it does. We all watched the video of Mr. Arbery being killed.
And you can see that video right here. I'm going to pull it up full.
So, it is one of those situations in which, yes, there are questions of why they would file an appeal, but in the event that the Court of Appeals sides with them, they won't be released anytime soon because, again, they have to go through the state process of appealing those convictions, and as far as we know, they're still trying to get that done. So there's a lot that stands between them and seeing freedom.
So I guess my question is now, what is the purpose of really appealing? Because just to break it down once again, so on the state conviction, that was a murder conviction that happened in a Georgia state court. So based on that conviction, all three men were sentenced to life in prison. And then in a separate court system, the federal court system, there was a conviction on hate crimes charges, federal hate crimes charges, and then the two McMichaels, the father and son, were sentenced to life in prison, again on separate charges, whereas William Roddy Bryan was sentenced to 35 years. So what is the purpose of two life sentences for someone when obviously we all have one life? What is the purpose of that? How does it change, how they spend their sentence? Maybe does it impact their chances of parole? How does it work?
So the easiest way to explain this would be if we just went through a hypothetical. If they were granted their appeal today, they would still be held for the state charges. Now, let's say one day a lenient governor comes into play and says, okay, well, I'm going to commute these guys' sentences and release them. Then they wouldn't be held in federal custody. So, again, it's almost like these guys are looking at the long-term aspect of this, of trying to get either these sentences overturned or, in the alternative, at least getting it where there won't be as many sentences that they would have to serve in the event some type of event happens that allows them to have their sentences commuted or overturned in the state court level.
Now, does it change in terms of what prison they would be held in?
So no. Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Let's answer it that way. So they are currently in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. If they are released, or if this appeal was granted, then they would be released from the Federal Bureau of Prisons and go to the Department of Corrections for the state of Georgia. Again, it doesn't mean that they are going to go from club fed to, the state prisons, which we all know have their own issues. It just means that they will be going from one maximum security prison to another. So they will still be held in maximum security prisons. That's why I say it doesn't really change what type of prisons, but maybe who's a administration of the prison.
Okay, yeah, that's an excellent point. There was a rally held earlier today, outside the Court of Appeals as the hearing was happening inside, and it started around 9 a.m. Outside the courtroom, we had, the father of the late Ahmaud Arbery, his family, outside the court, I should say, and the Georgia NAACP, among other groups, including Transformative Justice Coalition, Black Voters Matter, and other ralliers, really calling for justice. They don't want to see any bit of this overturned. They don't want to see any of these convictions overturned. And Marcus Arbery, the father of Ahmaud Arbery, made it clear that he's going to fight every step of the way for every bit of justice for his son. Do you have any reason to believe that Mr. Marcus Arbery and his family need to be concerned about, this appeal being granted, about these convictions being overturned?
Well, I want to be sensitive to their concerns because I've never lost a child, and I can't imagine losing a child. And especially when we watch, as it seems like there is a two-tiered system of justice in the United States, it is concerning to them. But I would if they were watching right now, I would give them the advice that this is just protocol. This is not something that is going to be determinative of whether or not these people will actually be getting out today. This is just what their lawyers do. They appeal. And even if you are to look at the text of the appeal by all three parties, it is on some esoteric type knowledge that one could just be incredulous at how they try and come up with this argument. I mean, one of the arguments is that it wasn't on a public street, so therefore the indictment was wrong. And that has already been proven false by the county actually taking care of the street in which Mr. Arbery was killed. Mm-hmm. There's another argument that a vehicle that was used to box Mr. Arbery in was not an instrumentality of interstate commerce. And other courts have already proven that it is an instrument of interstate commerce if these vehicles have parts from other states, things of that nature. It's the same thing as when a person has a federal gun charge and the gun is made in a different country or a different state or something of that nature. So again, if I could say anything to the family, it would just be, I understand your concerns. You should be concerned, but at the same time, this isn't one of those situations where it's just going to be, okay, they win today, they'll get out today. I don't see that happening.
Okay, no, and that's hopefully some comfort for people who are concerned about, these convictions being overturned. Another thing that might concern people is, let me just say, it's going to be several weeks before we have a ruling on this appeal. But another thing that people might be concerned about is the fact that the state convictions are being appealed as well. So the murder convictions in the state court are being appealed as well. What are your thoughts on that? What do we expect with that going forward?
Again, this is typical protocol. Anytime a person is convicted, it was one of the things that was taught to me in law school is after a client is convicted, you go ahead and file the motion or notice for a motion of new trial. So this is just going through all the steps that most attorneys and most criminal defendants are given in this United States. They are allowed to have an appeal. They are allowed to have counsel while they file this appeal. So again, they are just going through typical protocol. However, do I, in my personal opinion, think that they will be able to overturn these convictions? I don't see it.
Just big picture, I'm just kind of want to just comment on the criminal justice process. I mean, if you're just looking at the timeline, you know, the killing of Ahmaud Arbery was in 2020, and then it wasn't until 2022 that there was actually the conviction. And then now here we are in 2024, there are appeals. So I can just imagine for that family, it just must feel like, okay, 4 years later, we've been fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. It's got to be exhausting.
I would agree. I would agree.
Is this the normal pace of the criminal justice process in cases like this? I mean, how much longer is this going to go on where they feel that they have to fight?
Yes, this is the typical pace. Justice moves slow. And again, this is a family who had to wait until the actual video of him being killed was leaked to the media, in which the GBI came in and made arrests. They had made a lot of fanfare down in Glenn County about this death, and the DA there chose not to bring charges. Maybe it was because of the relationship with the McMichaels. That is up for debate. However, again, it is one of those things where it takes a while for everything to play out like it's supposed to. And in this particular instance, I do think that justice is moving slowly, but justice is moving surely. So, again, they will have a fight ahead of them, maybe for another couple of years, if they even try to appeal this to the Supreme Court. But, again, it just takes time.
Well, so that's my next question. I mean, you know, you hear the saying, justice delayed is justice denied. It's 4 years later, and you're still hearing from Marcus Arbery talking about trying to get justice for his son. There have already been convictions, and here he is having to appear outside of a courthouse again, you know, wondering if those convictions are going to be overturned. And that's just for the federal convictions. And again, now there are going to be appeals for the state convictions. So worst case scenario from his perspective, you know, if the appeals are successful, then what's the next step? What happens after that? If these convictions are overturned, then can the other side appeal and take it up to a higher court? I mean, what happens?
So if we're talking about the 11th Circuit appeal, then yes, if they are overturned, then it can be brought before another court. However, that is a rare occurrence, and there would have to be specific questions that the Supreme Court would have to look at to even determine if they want to hear that case. So, again, I agree with you that justice delayed is justice denied. But what we have to keep in mind is there is a backlog of cases throughout the United States. And yes, we as lawyers want to move everything quickly because memories get shaky after so much time. Witnesses might, die, move, whatever, what have you. And we would like to see it. But the nature of what we're in right now is that a lot of times it just takes time. And again, I know that's not the best thing that a lot of criminal defendants want to hear, or even people who are on the outside seeking justice for a loved one. They want their answers now, and I agree with them. They should be entitled to their answers now. But the reality of the situation is it just doesn't move that fast.
Okay, I have another question for you. So say this, the convictions stand and the court denies the appeal. Can Mr. Marcus Arbery rest easy that those convictions are just going to stand? I mean, say it happens in both federal court and state court, that the convictions, are upheld and, the appeal is denied, all that. Is that the end? Is it finally, he can finally have peace of mind?
He can have a peace of mind when the Supreme Court of the United States declines to hear the case and the Georgia Supreme Court gives them, affirms the decision. Once those two things happen, the only way that they could try to get the case overturned is if they were to file a habeas motion, and there's only so much time that a habeas motion can be filed. So, yes, I would say...
What's a habeas motion?
So a habeas motion is one of those motions. It's actually a civil motion that says present the body, and it's saying that a person is being unlawfully detained, unlawfully held. And that is a motion that the McMichaels and Mr. Bryan could file after they get finished with their direct appeals, which is their appeal to the state court of appeal, their appeal to the state Supreme Court, and also their appeal to the 11th Circuit. So if they were to bring this, that it would be the only way that they would be able to possibly see the light of day again. But again, there has to be a lot that falls in place for that to actually work.
I understand what you mean. Any final thoughts about this case?
Just hope that justice is given to the Arbery family and that they get the outlook that they are looking to get today.
Yeah. And I do want to ask you also before we let you go, you know, our viewers usually are curious about, you know, our guests, what kind of areas of law do you practice in? What kind of cases are you interested in taking, and how do people reach you?
So I'm a litigator, trial lawyer. I do criminal defense and personal injury. You can reach me on Instagram, JShippLaw, that's JShipplaw, or on Facebook, Jamara Shipp. You can also go to my website, jshipplaw.com, and you can contact me through their email or office number.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jamara Edward Shipp, joining us with analysis, and we so appreciate everybody joining us. Just want to let everybody know that we're going to continue to follow the latest on this story, as it could be several weeks before a ruling is made on whether this appeal will be granted, or rather a ruling on this appeal, I should say. And so we're going to keep following this much more ahead on Atlanta News First and Atlanta News First Plus. Thanks for joining us. And if you haven't done so yet, please download our free mobile news app to get updates sent right to your phone.